Well, my education at Maynooth set me on the path that I'm on. I became a scientist. I met my wife because I became a scientist. I went to Canada with her, went to Oxford with her, and ended up on the TV because I was a scientist, and that all started here.
So tonight we are delighted, as I said, to welcome our author, MU alum, scientist, and professional quizzer. I think that's probably quite a small club. Dr. Darragh Ennis, back to Maynooth. Known to many as the menace from the TV show The Chase, Darragh hails from a family with strong connections to the university. His mother, Violet, graduated with a BA in History and Geography, I believe, in 1992, and his brother, Paul, was awarded a postgraduate diploma in Educational Leadership in 2014. And from what I understand, Darragh also met his wife at Maynooth, is that right? They were both pursuing their doctorates of biology. So really, you're also part of the Maynooth Alumni Couples Club, which I assure you is much larger than the Professional Quizzers Club. In his new book, which you will have an opportunity to purchase over there a little bit later, and Darragh's going to do some signing right there, so keep that in mind and think about your Christmas list. In his new book, Dr. Ennis reveals everything, it says everything, about the human body in 10 informative bite-sized essays. The book explores many of the questions we all have about our bodies, like why is blood red, how do our bodies defend itself, why we sleep, and how hormones influence so much of what we do. And to guide us in tonight's conversation is another Maynooth grad, Dr. Andrew Hogan. Andy is a senior lecturer in the Maynooth University Department of Biology and is principal investigator with the Obesity Immunology Research Group. So tonight, Andy is going to be quizzing Darragh, sorry, pun intended, about his career, his time at Maynooth, and of course, the new book. After the talk, we're going to open up the floor to the audience, so think about your questions. And lastly, before I hand it over to my colleague, I just want to personally thank you, Darragh, for being such a terrific ambassador to the university. Wherever you go, you're wearing your Maynooth University Surf Club hoodie tonight. I didn't even know we had a Maynooth Surf Club, but apparently he's also the founder of that, so there's no end to the accomplishments. But really, truly, I'm really delighted that you are kind of proud to talk about Maynooth wherever you go. For someone like me, whose job is to talk and spread the university's reputation around the world, it's always great to have an alum that's known for being really smart, too, so that always helps. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Professor Paul Moyna, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Science and Engineering at Maynooth University. He's also the head of the Department of Biology and the director of the Kathleen Lonsdale Institute for Human Health Research. Prior to joining Maynooth, he was founding head of the UCD School of Biomolecular and Biomedical Science, and in 2019, Paul was elected as a member of the Royal Irish Academy. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Moyna.
Darragh, you're very welcome. You're really one of our own. I especially want to express thanks because whenever I've heard Darragh speak publicly, he speaks fondly of his time in Maynooth, and he's a fantastic ambassador for the university. And we're really very appreciative, Darragh, of your generosity in terms of highlighting your links with the university at all times. So we really appreciate that. So tonight on stage, Darragh is going to be joined by Andy Hogan. So Andy, again, is a close friend of Darragh, dating back to their undergraduate days here at Maynooth University. Andy is also an alumnus of the university and completed his undergraduate in biology and a PhD in immunology. And Andy is currently a staff member, senior lecturer in the Department of Biology at Maynooth University, a principal investigator with Obesity Immunology Research Group, and is actually one of the world leaders in terms of obesity-related research. So it's a great pleasure now to welcome both Andy and Darragh to the stage.
Well, Darragh, welcome home.
Oh, thanks very much.
It is still home?
Yeah.
It'll always be home, yeah, it'll always be home. So I guess, listen, we kind of know your background, but why science and why Maynooth?
Well, I always liked science, and I always really, really wanted to know how things worked. And like, my mother is here, and she would tell you I never stopped asking questions. I was that child. And I always wanted to know how the world worked. I wanted to tell me why, what's the reason for this. So I think at heart I was always curious and a scientist anyway. But I had been in university in Sligo. I went to IT Sligo the year before I came to Maynooth, and I was miserable. I really didn't like, I liked science, but I didn't like being away from home. So I moved back home, and then my mother had been here, and my brother had been here as well. So I said, this is the place for me. So I came to Maynooth then. Yeah,
so you enrolled then in science in 99?
Yeah, started in 99 in general science.
Yeah. And I guess that's one thing that kind of we always see with Maynooth is that people coming back and back again.
Yeah.
So you talk us through your undergraduate days, kind of just up to your postgrad.
Yeah, I had a great time as an undergrad. I really enjoyed it. I made lots and lots of friends, and I was able to really flourish here. I had such a good time. I struggled a little bit with maths. Luckily, Ciara McAmort, who's in the audience here, was able to help me. So I was, in first year, I was really struggling with maths, but this was something I thought this was going to be the end of me, because if I failed after dropping out already, I'd have to get a job and join the real world, which I didn't really want to do. But Kieran was very generous with his time, and he gave me a lot of support and a lot of help. So that was the sort of bump in the road. But once I got past that, I just found it so fascinating. I loved all of the lectures. I really liked the nightlife, the social aspect of things. And yeah, it was brilliant. It was such a nice time.
So, bring us then into your postgrad days, because you enrolled in a PhD. And at what stage did you know PhD is definitely for me and it has to be on this topic in this lab? Or how did you get to your PhD?
So this kind of started when we were in the summer holidays of third year, before we did our final year. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And our friend Nadine got the flu, and she was meant to go on the ecology field trip. And Tom, who's here, my friend, phoned me up and said, we're going to Mayo for a week before thing. Do you want to come along? We need to go tomorrow. So I borrowed some money from my sister, because I had no money, and I went on a field trip. And that was absolutely life-changing. It really, really was. Went with Professor Griffin and Professor Downs and had the very best time. And I was really into the whole ecology thing. So when we came back for fourth year, I said, I'm going into one of their labs. And I did, ended up in Martin Downs' lab, and just was genuinely fascinated by it. And my project was a disaster. It didn't work. I got no results. Turned out I was trying to mate two different species, by the way, which doesn't actually work. And we didn't know at the time, but that's what was happening. And I said, I'm doing this. And I stayed on in the lab to do a summer sort of internship, and I was working in forests, digging stuff up. And one day, Aoife Dillon, who was the postdoc on the project, said, hey, Bones, which is what everybody called me, do you want to do a PhD? And I said, yeah. And that was it. That was the entirety of my interview. It was a different time. But yeah, I had no hesitation whatsoever. By that time, I was hooked. I really loved it.
Yeah. And then, so tell us about the PhD project.
So the PhD project was, we were working trying to replace or find alternatives to the chemical pesticides. So we were using insect-killing microscopic worms that are everywhere. They're in the soil, and we were applying them, millions and millions of them, to tree stumps to kill a forestry insect pest. And that was the whole thing. And I was working on the behaviour side of things. We were trying to figure out the best way to apply it, how it works, which strain to apply, and looking how the insect reacts to it and how it interacts with the pest. And that was my side of the project. And it was great. I had so much fun. And, we worked really, really long hours in the summer because we were doing field trials. And then in the winter, we kind of just did data and had a bit more of a mess about. It was intense, and then periods of just having a bit of fun.
I used to love visiting your lab because there was strawberries, right?
Yeah.
There was always a bucket. You could eat 12 strawberries because they weren't infected.
Yeah.
So we'd have this lab. Ours was all molecular biology and so on. It's just like moving small amounts of liquid from one place to another. And you go over with a bucket of strawberries, like you can eat those ones, you can't eat those ones.
So Dora in our lab was working on funguses in strawberries, wasn't it? Yeah. There was always strawberries around. We were always in trouble with the safety officer, always.
Yeah.
Like, we were always eating in the lab, and we were working with chainsaws and chisels and everything. We were his worst nightmare.
It was so different.
And the poor man, poor Austin Power was his name. He was under that.
He's still here.
He was under, and he said, like, as soon as the movie came out, no one listened to him anymore. It was like, it was really unfair. But yeah, no, it was. That wasn't the only reason you came to my lab, though. So you might like this, actually. Most people who do biological research, especially, are women. And Andy needed blood for control samples. And none of the girls wanted to give him blood. So he used to go, I need 10 vials. And he was like, oh. And I go in, and a nurse would be drawing blood out of me.
We had ethics, and it was all done.
It was all done properly, He wasn't doing it. There was a nurse doing it. It was all done properly. But he just couldn't get enough volunteers. So I'd come out white out of the lab.
One of my favourite things was going in one day and seeing Darragh with nail varnish.
Yeah.
That was one of your tools, right?
Yeah. So we were trying to figure out where the insects whether they ingested the worms, whether they get through their breeding holes or whatever. So I was trying to use nail varnish to shut down the mouth of a beetle. But the beetle eats wood for food, so its mouth was just chewing through this. I spent 2 weeks trying to convince or figure out a way to close the mouth hole of a beetle. That did not work.
Okay. It was funny how these things live. You kind of go, all these dolls for 4 years was just put nail varnish on their lips. And,
I used like a sewing machine more than a PCR machine.
Yeah. No, there was hammers on logs.
It was a different world.
So obviously then when you left here then, as Paul said, you went to Montreal, but really the research that fascinates me was when you went to Oxford.
Yeah, that was
that was some really cool science. So would you just tell us a bit about
that was completely different. So when I went to Oxford, I really struggled to get work. I applied to over 100 jobs, including like supermarket jobs, and no one would employ me. It was a different time. There was there was so many people looking for jobs, and then eventually the only job I could get wasn't in forestry or ecology. It was in a neuroscience lab.
And so how long did you stay in that environment for?
Nearly 12 years. So I settled in and I kept getting promoted. So I started out as a technician and ended up essentially running the lab. I was the lab manager. And me and my boss got along really well. We were friends, and it was such a great place to work. I had a brilliant time. I'm actually going on Wednesday. I'm going to visit him. He's up in Glasgow now. He's moved his lab. But I'm going to visit him and visit the new lab. And I still interact with him and still work with him a little bit.
So at what point then, because I guess most of the room probably know you as a professional quizzer now.
Yeah.
We know you as Bones and a scientist. And, so at what stage did that happen?
Well, I needed a door for my house. So I bought my first house, and Oxford makes Dublin look cheap. It's so expensive to buy. So I bought essentially a tiny, tiny rundown house. And the previous owner had built their own conservatory, which the door didn't work properly and it didn't lock. And they removed the back door. So it was freezing cold in the house. And I said, we should buy a new one. But we just bought the house and we're completely broke. And doors are really expensive. Like way more than they should be. They cost a fortune. So at that point, I'd started doing a quiz competition where I'm in a quiz league in Oxford with a group from the local GAA club. And they advertised looking for people. And I applied for loads of game shows. And I ended up on one that nobody saw, thankfully, because I didn't win, called Rebound. And then I ended up on The Chase as a contestant. And I won the money on the show. And I called my wife, and they sent the money straight away. And she ordered the door. Before I even got home, the money was gone.
Yeah.
But our house was warm, so it made a big, big difference. It really helped.
So tell us about the show where you're contesting, because I guess what really made it was that you won all the money, but then everyone else kind of took your money. Isn't
no,
it?
That's not how it works. But yeah, that's how people perceive it.
There was a petition online to get your money back. So tell us about the show.
So for people, anybody who's here who hasn't actually seen the show, because I'm sure there will be one or two at least, the concept of the show is you've got 4 people who don't know each other who play a professional. And you put money into the bank, and if you win the show, you win a share of the money. That's how it works. But the money is not real until you win it. It's only numbers on a screen. So I put 9,000 into the bank, and all of the other people on my team took what is the lower offer. So they took either a very low amount or a negative amount. So we ended up with quite a low pot of money. But I got paid like 1,700 quid for like an hour's work. It was brilliant money, It was like being a bricklayer or something, just people throwing money at you. It was great.
Yeah.
But people went bananas about this. Like, it was the day that Article 50 was being debated in Parliament in Westminster. The most important political event probably since the Second World War, and my TV show was being talked about more. It was trending higher on all social media. It was on the front news of all the papers, the front page. People started to GoFundMe to get me back the money I'd lost, but I never lost it. It's not real. Yeah. Like, it's not real money. It's like Monopoly money until you win it. And people were so genuinely so upset about it, but I didn't care.
And obviously this happens all the time. Why you?
Well, why would I get picked?
No. Oh. Why do you think this outcry was for you?
Oh, so the thing that happened to me never happened before. So the thing of the first person putting money in and everybody else going low, they'd done, I think they were on series 14 at that point. So it was a few thousand episodes, and it had never, ever happened before. So people just went absolutely bonkers. And they need to get a life. Like, there's more important things.
Yeah. And I guess, was that the catalyst then for the producers calling you up? And how long after the show did that happen?
So it was well before the show aired. So they called me a couple of weeks after we recorded, which is months and months. Television is not anywhere near live, just so you know. A lot of stuff was recorded way in advance. I think it was 5 or 6 months in advance. And they called me up, and I really, really nearly hung up because I thought it was my mates from Racool pulling a prank. And if any of you know my mates from Racool, that's exactly the kind of thing that they do. But they knew too much, they had too much information. And I was in training to be the next chaser for like 4 months before the show ever aired. Yeah.
Okay, wow. And so there was multiple auditions. And what did they look like?
So the first time I went down, and it was like a panel from the production team, and they had a little camera and they videoed me and they asked me a load of questions, either quiz questions or they just chatted to me to see how I'd interact. And then after that, they identified weaknesses in my quizzing knowledge. So things that I wasn't getting right, they would run through, why you should have got it right, where the thing should have been. You should have noticed this clue, you should have noticed that, you should have noticed this. And that went on for 2 years. It was a long time. So I was good at quizzing before, but to get to the level that they needed took a very, very long time. So yeah, there was a 2-year process. And I wasn't guaranteed the job at that point, because when we did screen testing, there was at least one other person, because I met him on the day we were doing screen testing. And that might not have been them all, so it could have been a few.
So then, of course, we all just think you're a genius, and I'm sure you are.
Well, you don't,
No,
me.
I definitely don't think you're a genius. So then the question is, how much study do you do? Because there must be, even say for example, the British kings.
Yeah.
Right? Because obviously we don't learn that here.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden that's part of your repertoire. How much study you do?
Things like that are actually easy because they're a list and they stop. The big problems are moving targets. So who wins the Oscars, who's in the soaps, who's top of the charts, who has this album. Those things never stop. So I have to constantly keep on top of them. And then I learn all the lists. I do a lot of quizzes. So at the minute I'm in 4 different quiz competitions every week. Scheduling that while I'm here has been good fun. I do loads of online stuff. When I'm coming up to a recording session, I'll probably do 4 or 5 hours a day. But I tend to keep my hand in. I do quizzes all year round and then do intensive studying just before we record.
So it becomes a full-time job. You can see why.
There's a lot
it's hard to balance it.
Yeah, the filming is actually relatively the easy part. That's the bit that takes the least time. I spend minimum of 10 times more studying than I do recording.
What's the key to the show for you? Is it the pressure? Is it the recall?
It's speed of recall, and that's related to pressure. So there's a lot of people who are better quizzers than me. If I go to a quiz competition, I am genuinely very mid-table. My quiz team in the Oxfordshire Quiz League are not at the top. We don't win it. So there's people that absolutely would dominate in that format where they're sitting down with a piece of paper and they have 2 hours and they write it out. But if you put them on the chair that I sit in with the cameras on them and the lights on them and tell them you have less than a second to answer every one of these questions, they would do terribly badly. They would just completely collapse. And I do as well. That happens to me sometimes. And if you're watching the show, sometimes you see me and you see like my eyes start flickering and I start watching the clock because we're all people. The pressure can get to you. But if you can put it off, and we're trained to put it off, if you can put it off and you get one wrong, you just flick it to the back of your mind and go to the next thing. That's the really hard bit, because if it preys on your mind, recall speed goes down and then you're finished.
Kind of let's move on to this. And, I said I had the pleasure of listening to it actually. So I got on Audible and Darragh reads it, so you get to hear his dulcet tones.
Yes,
it's really good. No, but I really enjoyed it, and as Paul said, it's really accessible. How did that come about? Was it you, I'm going to write a book? Was it, how did you?
No, the publishers contacted me.
Right.
So this is a series of books, and they're genuinely very good. So there's ones on dinosaurs, space, the deep sea, trees, which is surprisingly brilliant, actually, and very interesting. And they contacted me and said, look, we have this series of books. We want someone to write one about the human body. Is that something you could do? I said, yeah, no problem. I'd love to do that. I'm a supremely confident person. No matter what topic they said, I would have said no problem. But I would say, yeah, no problem. It's a basic biology book, cellular biology, the human body. I know enough to at least do it with a bit of research. When do you need it by? 6 weeks. Yeah. I wrote it in 6 weeks, so I got it done. So they wanted me to do it, and I said, I've always wanted to write a science book for normal people. I never wanted to write a textbook. I always wanted to do this kind of thing, but this was just a perfect opportunity, and they were ready to do it, and I was ready to do it, and I had a bit of time, so yeah, I just did it.
So as you said, there's 10 things. When you went in researching this, was there any one particular area that you kind of said, I love this, I'd like to know more about this? Like what really drew you? Was there a particular part of the book that you found fascinating?
Yeah, why do we sleep? I still can't get my head around it. It doesn't make sense. Like, I know we sleep because we get tired, boring answer, but animals going to sleep is really dangerous. It's so, evolution should have thrown that away, millions of years ago. And everything sleeps. Even microscopic animals sleep. Fruit flies sleep. The whole circadian rhythm thing was founded. The Nobel Prize that was won on that was done on fruit fly research. Worms sleep. Nematodes sleep. You know, this doesn't make even the tiniest bit of sense. So it's some really deep-rooted thing of how our nervous systems work. And I'm really fascinated by it. And we still don't know an awful lot about it. There's still tons that we don't know. So I would love to do a bit more on sleep research, actually.
I think one of my favorite things was the primitive line. so the thing, and I guess, you know, what struck me was, you might want to explain this primitive line where the embryo has this splits into the right and left, but it's the adult remnant of it, which I never knew.
Yeah.
Do you know, can you remember the name?
Yeah, the philtrum, yeah.
The philtrum, yeah.
Yeah, so this is when you start out as a single cell and you eventually end up, the number changes all of the time, but the top end, so the number is 30 or 40 trillion cells in total. You start out as essentially a little flat sheet, and then it rolls into a tube. And the bit where it joins is this line here. And you still see it. That bit between your nose and your upper lip is called the philtrum. And it runs all the way down. It's down the middle of your tongue. You see it in certain parts of your body still. And that is all done. And that's decided within like a very small number of days after you're conceived. And it's fixed. And how that's fixed and how those handful of cells know, in inverted commas, how they're able to do that consistently, it's astonishing. Patterning and embryo development is a really, really interesting area of science.
What's next? Like, what would you, I guess, what is next, and then what would you love to do if you had free reign and all the money in the world?
Yeah, well, if I had all the money in the world, it would be very different. But if the day I submitted this, the publisher said, so what are you going to do for your next book? And I was really annoyed, actually. I was going, because I'd just spent 6 weeks frantically writing it. But I've been thinking about it since. I'm going to write one about memory, because I think it encompasses everything that I do. So I'm going to write one not just about, you know, the science of memory, but, you know, memory techniques that I use for quiz, memory loss, because, you know, my dad, my grandmother, my mother-in-law all had dementia, you know, so I want to talk about memory as a whole thing, about the human experience, what memories are physically in your mind, how they're formed, how they're lost, how to make them, how to keep them, all that kind of thing. So I want to do a book. I need a good, clever title, though, so, you know, because at the moment I've got The Memory Book, which isn't great.
Yeah, so that's underway. That's
well, I haven't got a contract to do it yet, but I will likely start writing that next year, yeah.
Going forward, then it's going to be professional quizzing and author and kind of writing.
What I'd really like to do is do a science program on TV for adults, because there isn't one. It's weird. Every time I pitch this to, like, because I really do try. I pitch stuff about quiz shows and different shows. There used to be Tomorrow's World and a few others. There isn't a single science program for adults on any network. It's not on streaming. The only things that are on are nature programs and maybe Brian Cox's Planet ones. But the world, and if ever we needed to have people to be informed by actual scientists, it's now. Like, I posted a video, this will sum up my frustration with the world, about isn't it crazy that we didn't put wheels on suitcases until 1970. That's when they were patented. And we literally landed on the moon before we thought about putting wheels on suitcases. And I thought that was a nice, fun way of going, isn't the world weird? And I got, like, thousands of people going, oh, of course we didn't land on the moon. And I mean, and they were so, and it's like, I thought you were clever. You should know better than that, of course. And they're not joking. There's a huge number of grown adults who believe tons of conspiracy theories. So I think if ever the world needs to have a Tomorrow's World or some, and I'd really like to do that show, but I can't convince anyone to make it.
No, I do think the next 4 years are going to be challenging.
Yeah.
And as science communicators, we're needed more than ever.
Yeah.
And it's so important that, you know, we kind of keep pushing back. And like, I guess there's been this big exodus from X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, to there's new great apps like Blue Sky. But there is this thing that we need people there, because you have to push back. You have to fact check. You have to put yourself out and say, no, listen, fluoride does not dim the brain, which is, you know, so very soon we're going to lose fluoride our American friends are going to lose fluoride from the water.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's a really important role to have.
Well, the dentist will be happy.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. It's the next 4 years.
Yeah.
I guess, listen, you don't want to chat to me. The people out there are the ones that have the interesting questions. So are we going to open it up to the floor?
Yeah, sure.
Here you go. This
yes,
young man here.
What do you rather more, the chase or science?
That's a great question. Why aren't you asking questions like that? I love them both for very different reasons, but I would be a fool to say not the chase because the money is way better. But out of job satisfaction and my life satisfaction, I've loved being a scientist way more. I have had such a great time being a scientist, and it's so rewarding when it is rewarding. When it's difficult science, it's very hard because sometimes your experiments don't work and it can be really hard to get your head around that. But yeah, both of them have been great, but money's better on the chase, but a scientist is better.
Well, Darragh, I just wanted to ask you, like, do you have any, like, or did you have any effective ways to, like, be able to, like, study, like, large quantities of information, going back to, like, how you were in your, like...
When I was a student?
Yeah.
I've got better at this since I've done it for a job, but I found essentially things like mnemonics and patterns and linking things together helps me. It really, really helps me. So if I know one fact and I can link another fact to it, it makes it easier to remember, or if I can make something memorable in some way. So, for example, I have to know the dates that people are alive for my current job. These are like historical figures. So if I group them together and I go, okay, say Genghis Khan was alive at the same time as King John of England. And King John signed Magna Carta, and I know that happened in 1215. So I know all three of those things happened in and around 1215. So if a question comes up on a quiz, you know, which 13th century figure, a conqueror or whatever, I can go, okay, that's probably Genghis Khan. You know, so linking them together and making them stick in your mind by putting them together with other things you already know is a really effective way. But the other thing, and this is going to sound horrible to a student, is repetition. Going over things, rewriting out your notes. If you're a written down person like I am, actually writing out the same notes again and condensing them into a smaller format that you can read over quickly really, really helped me. But it depends on how you learn. If you're a visual learner drawing diagrams, you need to find whatever way you can make it interesting to your brain, and then it'll stick. If it's not interesting, you'll just forget it. Sorry, I wish I could give you a magic trick, but there isn't one. This is why I study 4 hours a day. Yeah. The menace. Am I a menace?
Yeah, I think there's... Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Well,
Where did it come from? Is it just the rhyme?
It is just the rhyme, and Dennis the Menace, D-Ennis the Menace, so it was that. But I didn't know it. I never agreed to it. Wasn't told it. The first time I heard it was when we were recording the show, and I walked out. And Brad said it as I walked out. They wanted to call me the professor, and I said no, because, you know, working in a university, calling someone a professor who's not a professor is a bad look. But and then after that first show, my main note from the producers was, you're meant to be menacing. Stop looking like you're enjoying yourself so much.
Do you think you'd ever write a quiz book?
Probably not. I was approached to write one, but, you know, Mark has done a couple, a load of the others have, and it wouldn't be fun to write. You know, writing just a book of questions would be functional and it'd be good for helping me learn stuff. But this was fun. I liked writing this. I enjoyed it. And if any of you do get the audiobook, I actually really liked reading it. I was going, this is great, even though I wrote it myself. You know, again, massive ego. But I genuinely, and I have a mission in my life. I want to marry sort of my celebrity and science. That's what I want to do. I don't think anyone would buy a quiz book, and I don't think I'd like writing it, so probably not. Well, it depends on the money.
So was there a time period during your own PhD where your experiments didn't really work and you got kind of down on yourself? Because I'm currently, I'm in the middle of a PhD myself and nothing's working and I'm miserable. And how did you deal with that?
Okay, so there's a wonderful woman in the audience, Emer Ryan, who I had to go into her lab and try and do, this is so outdated, it's actually ridiculous. I had to try and do a genetic method called AFLP. And you don't need to know anything about it. It's so outdated. It would be like saying, you know, you're a fax machine repairman. It's so outdated. And now, if we wanted to do the same experiment, we could do it in about 25 minutes and get better results. I spent 11 months trying to make it work, and those 11 months translated to 9 pages in my thesis. Less than a page a month. And that's like 1.5 spaced as well. The bottom line was that it wasn't a suitable method to use for what we were trying to do. But I was at a very, very low point. And like I really thought, you know, I can make this work. And I was going, this is going to be great because it's different to my ecological and behavioral stuff. It shows I've got another No. I stayed away from molecular biology for a long time after that because I was burned. Everybody has a bad time. Anybody who says they sailed through their PhD is either a freak or a liar. There is always a downside. So 11 months with 0 results is about as bad as you get, I get. But yeah, just keep going and it will hopefully get better. If you want to know how things work and how the world works, the best way to do it is to do science. And this, I think, is the best place to do it.